What's good, YouTube? Welcome to another episode of the H-Town Shutdown. I am your host, R Press, and we got a lot of Houston sports to talk about, specifically the Houston Astros and the Houston Texans. Texans got their first win this past week. We will start there and move on to the Houston Astros, who are in a playoff battle or playoff positioning battle in an American League West battle. They are currently in the sixth spot, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's start with the Houston Texans, who get their first win of the season. I got to admit, man, that win was extremely impressive. CJ Stroud absolutely carved up the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if you look quietly, he's been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL in the first three, for the first three games. A lot of guys are struggling. This guy isn't. Hasn't thrown a pick, most yards ever through three games without throwing a pick for a rookie. He's just in control and he's in command. And, you know, I've been a guy, I have to admit, I've been a guy that has questioned Ohio State quarterbacks. You see how Justin Fields is doing over in Chicago. Not great. Hold on, guys. Let me get my light in right. Should have done that beforehand. That's my bad. There we go. All right. Yeah. Much better. And I question Ohio State quarterbacks because they don't seem to translate to the NFL. This guy just seems different. And you know what? It's one of the best feelings for a fan base to see, guys, we might have a quarterback. I think we got a quarterback. It's a great feeling, man. He was so in control. And if you look back at that draft, Bryce Young was the number one pick. Richardson kind of, snuck up on everybody and became the number 4 pick. And he played a pretty good game before he got hurt in that first quarter against Houston last week. But if you look at it, man, CJ's been steady. And he continues to impress with his play, with his confidence, with his poise. And let's talk about the skill set. The touch is there. The anticipation is there. The presence in the pocket is there. He can move, but his strength is standing in the pocket and delivering every throw that needs to be delivered. Tank Dell has become a game breaker. And you could kind of see that forming in the preseason, but it was nice to see it happen in a game. They won 37-17. I remember I mentioned this in an earlier episode. Game-breaking speed and game-breaking plays, big plays, 50-yard throws, 70-yard throws. That's something that the Texans have been lacking for a few years. Even in the Deshaun Watson years, you might get one explosive play every 4 games, but it was really just moving the ball down the field and really Watson making something happen out of nothing. Well, this offense, I didn't see it in the preseason. The first couple games was hard to see it, but this last game, the explosion was there. Hey guys, the run game returned too. Pierce had a good game. Singletary actually moving the ball as when he ran the ball. It was nice to see it all come together. Let's talk about the defense. It was such a good game for them. And remember, in last week's episode, I said, listen, I saw that Kansas City had a game plan and they stifled Trevor Lawrence. Maybe the Texans can duplicate that. Plus they see him twice a year and they've had relatively good success against the Jaguars. So maybe that translates into this game as the defense can pull it together. Well, Jimmy Ward coming back helps. The linebackers have been, let's just give the linebackers credit, man. Jonathan Greenyard, Henry Tioto. These guys have been putting together, Harris, these guys have been putting together a pretty pretty impressive start to their 2023 season. Stopping the run, getting everybody in position, filling the gaps. Will Anderson, he flashed again, ladies and gentlemen. He's been flashing every single game, and he's causing havoc on the line of scrimmage. Got a blocked field goal, but we got to give props and respect to the special teams. 2 big plays: the before mentioned blocked field goal, and the return by Andrew Beck, the fullback. It was a fascinating play. It looks like he had stepped in the way of catching the ball at first. I'm not sure who it was behind him, but he stepped in and caught the ball, fumbled it, picked it back up, made a couple of guys miss, headed towards the sideline, started headed up after he hit the sideline, headed upfield, made 2 more guys miss. Next thing you know, he was in the end zone. It was a hell of a play and an athletic play. And once that happened, you knew the Texans are probably going to win this game because Jacksonville had scored to cut the lead to 7, and boom, Texans returned a kickoff for a touchdown. Something that, not much of that has happened in the past few years. And I'm not just talking about the past couple years. I'm talking about the Bill O'Brien years too. We didn't get much done in special teams either. So that was good to see. I know it's one game, and next week's game is going to be it's going to be tougher. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into town. That defense has been pretty much won them 2 games. The offense kind of came together this last game with the against the Raiders. But the Raiders defense is just every single year. We'll talk about them on the NFL episode. I'll be recording that tomorrow. But it's going to be a good game. J.J. Watt's coming back. I think he's getting his number retired. His brother's in town, T.J. Watt with the Steelers. That Steelers defense has been humming, man. They have been causing turnovers, wreaking havoc. So it's going to be an even greater challenge. But I will say this. The most impressive stat after all those things that I named was 0 sacks. The offensive line came to play against the Jaguars, which, has a pretty good pass rush. The offensive line came to play and they delivered. So that's all I'm seeing, and we're seeing now as Texan fans. That's all we really need, man. We need that offensive line to not crumble. We know that there's going to be plays. We know there's going to be times where, there's going to be some mishaps. There's going to be a sack here or there. There's going to be some hurries. But if you can keep it together, not just in the passing game, but the running game, you could play like a unit. Because, listen, we're still missing Titus Howard. We're still missing Laramie Tunsil. Doesn't look like Tunsil's going to play this week either. But they still did good. I have to say, Fant did an excellent job on the right tackle, and the rest of the guys coming together, pushing the Jaguars' defensive line around. It was impressive to see. It really was. And I didn't expect it. So as hurt as the Texans are, listen, guys, if you look at the Texans' injury report, there's a bunch of starters on there. So this isn't even a fully healthy team. We've been missing Petrie for a while, just got back Jimmy Ward. There's guys going in our offensive line, defensive line players. We're missing a lot of starters. So just saying that, to get a 20-point win on the road against the Jaguars, who was favored to win this division at the beginning of the season, it's pretty satisfying, man. It really is. So the Texans win was huge, man. And I'm looking forward to this team because let's break it down. The Colts are actually leading the division after 3 games. They are 2-1, wins over the Texans, and they won this past week against Baltimore. 2 road wins. Impressive. I will give them that. Next up is the Texans at 1-2, beating Jacksonville. So there's already a divisional win after losses to the Ravens and the Colts. Next up is the Tennessee Titans. They are also 1-2. They won against the Chargers in week 2, but dropped a close game to the Saints in week 1 and just flat out got destroyed by the Cleveland Browns this past weekend. They couldn't do anything. In Jacksonville at 1-2, 2 home losses, 1 to the Chiefs, 1 to the Texans. I say that to say this division is wide open. there's going to be chances and opportunities throughout the season for the Texans to do something that many people don't expect them to do, compete for the division. When I did my picks, I had the Texans winning, I think it was six games, maybe even 7. But I had them in second place in the division. I had them or third place in the division, competing towards the end of the year. Well, I'm not saying I underestimated them. I'm just saying that it might be closer than what I think. This division might not be as out of reach as I thought it would have been at the beginning of the year. So there's going to be opportunities. Let's take a look at let me find the Texans schedule to kind of give you an idea of what's coming up and what it looks like for them and how those opportunities can present themselves. Next up, as I mentioned, they're at home against the Steelers. That's going to be a tough game. Then they're on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta is a little bit better than I thought this year. That's going to be tough. Then they're at home versus the Saints. So those are the next 3 weeks. Home against the Steelers, on the road against the Falcons in Atlanta, and at home against the Saints. Who knows about the Derek Carr injury? That game looks a lot closer and looks a lot better if Jameis Winston is going as the starting quarterback and not Derek Carr. As for the Falcons, they took a loss to Detroit this past week. I'm not impressed by Ritter. They got some weapons, but they don't really have guys that separate. Bijan Robinson is a difference maker in that run game with Algier is a difference maker. They've got some veterans in the on the defensive end. They added Calais Campbell, Jesse Bates. So Falcons are going to be a competitive game. They're going to be a competitive team throughout this season. But this week's game coming up, the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's going to be another test for not only this team, but for CJ Stroud. Mike Tomlin always has his team prepared, so it's going to be a test for D'Amico. See how he measures up against a veteran-laden team, such as they got a lot of young players too, but the Steelers, led by future Hall of Famer Mike Tomlin, and we'll see what they have in store. They got some game breakers. I saw some guys this past week for Pittsburgh that I can see why the Steeler fans, and we'll talk about it on the NFL show that I do tomorrow, why Steeler fans are saying fire Matt Canada. There's talent on that offense, so why are they struggling so much? Hopefully we can contribute to the struggle continuing. The problem I see is the pass rush that could be coming down the pipeline. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, both of our starting tackles are out. I just said the offensive line did a great job this past week against Jacksonville. It's going to be a little bit tougher against those two and against this team and that scheme that the Steelers have. Minka Fitzpatrick back there, Roman. It's going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge that the Texans should look forward to and they should meet. And you got the game at home. So coming off a win, a lot of confidence. But before I look forward to it. But before we move on to the Astros, I just got to say, man, I am, after 3 games, very impressed with CJ Stroud. Very impressed, man. No interceptions yet as a rookie. Not even one of those weird tip picks, not even that. And I before the draft, and I got to admit, I fell for it. Oh, his ceiling, the thing was his ceiling isn't as high as, say, a Richardson or Bryce Young is ready to go right now. I'm not saying that Bryce Young is. I like Bryce Young. I thought he would be a. I didn't like his size, so that's why I didn't want the Texans to pick him. I thought he might be prone to get hurt, and if he had to take hits behind a putrid offensive line such as the Carolina Panthers, he would miss games, and he already missed the games past week. So the most ready to go right now player in that draft was at quarterback was CJ Stroud. So, in other words, they talk about the ceiling of the other players and how Richardson's ceiling is so high, but his floor is probably way lower than CJ Stroud. Stroud's floor, maybe his upside isn't as high up as Richardson's possibly could be, but his floor is way higher. And it's showing right now, and it's going to show throughout the season. Of course, there's going to be some struggles, there's going to be some bumps in the road, but the way he's handling it right now, just in 3 games, no interceptions, and it's not like he's dinking and dunking and not afraid to go deep. The guy is throwing every throw. So the anticipation, the touch, and the confidence is there. And let's be honest, the offensive line only played 1 good game, and that was this past week. They didn't play a good game against the Colts, and they weren't good against the Ravens. And that still didn't faze him or make him make the mistake that usually rookies make. And I'm not saying that he won't throughout the year. We know mistakes are going to come, especially for rookies. More film, more tape. Defenses are going to scheme to exploit any weaknesses they see in his game. But from what I've seen right now, the guy is ready, and he's more ready than anybody else that was in that draft. And he's proving it right now. Front runner for Rookie of the Year, offense on the offensive side. So great upside. It feels good to get a win this week. Let's see if we can duplicate that and get to 2-2, and against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and see what the month of October holds for the Texans. Man, felt good to get that win. Good job, fellas. Good job. Now on to the Houston Astros. The ups and downs of this team has just been absolutely excruciating. When I talked to you guys last, which was Wednesday, they had just squeaked out a win and salvaged the series against the Baltimore Orioles. And they went on to go, they stayed at home, and they played a 3-game series against the Kansas City Royals, a team that just beat them the week before 2 out of 3. And the Astros go and get swept at home. Swept by the Kansas City Royals out. It doesn't get any lower than that. It just does not get any lower than that. They were swept at home 3 straight games. Going into that weekend series with a half-game lead over the Texas Rangers and the Seattle Mariners, and they end up getting swept. Now the Rangers have a 2.5-game lead on, they currently do too, but going into the series, this Monday series, they had a 2.5-game lead. Now, Texas ended up sweeping Seattle in that series, so Seattle fell behind 3 games, which leads us to Monday. Right now, it's currently Tuesday night. The Astros are currently playing the Mariners. Monday's game, Justin Verlander comes on the mound and pitches an absolute gem that quite possibly saved the season of the Houston Astros. They beat the Mariners 5-1, a team that has owned us this entire season. We hadn't figured out their pitching, and they had a pretty good beat on ours. Well, they couldn't figure out Verlander last night, and he pitched a vintage Justin Verlander game, striking out, 8, going all the way to the 9th inning, scoreless. The guy was absolutely phenomenal, and that quite possibly saved the season because it was going downhill from there. And if you started off this series with a loss, the momentum would have shifted completely, which I believe has now shifted in the favor of the Houston Astros in this series. Christian Javier is on the mound right now, but they go on to win it 5-1. Big hits from Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker. Huge home runs. They figured out Luis Castillo. He gave up all 5 of the runs. Their ace. And that's a good feeling because he was a guy, except for Yordan Alvarez, he was a guy that the Astros struggled with. Now, tonight they're facing George Kirby. Let me get an update on that score. By the time you guys watch this, you probably already know the score or what happened. But the game's going on live right now, and Texas is down Texas down 4-1, top of the fifth to the LA Angels. And it's 0-0 at the end of two. Christian Javier on the mound. But getting that first win created a little separation between Seattle and Houston. Now the lead is a game and a half. And Houston's currently in that sixth spot, the final wild card spot, if the playoffs were to end today. 2.5 games behind the Texas Rangers for the division. So the division is still available to win. They just got to win all their games. Astros got to win the rest of their games. And that might be asking a lot. But, it might be asking a lot for this team. But they're on the road. They play a lot better on the road. I wouldn't mind if we don't see Minute Maid Park again. Listen, I just want to get into the game. Let's get into the dance. We get into the dance. If we get in as that 6 seed, we get a matchup with the 3 seed Minnesota Twins. All 3 of the games in Minneapolis. I'm not saying that, we should be guaranteed or overlook the Twins. I think the Twins are a pretty good team. Royce Lewis has been raking this entire season. Now, I did see that he was injured. I don't know if he's back or will he be back by the time the playoffs start. But in the games, they played the Twins back in Memorial Day, so back in May. The difference maker was Royce Lewis. And he's been a difference maker this past month for the Twins. And he's a dangerous, dangerous hitter. So if he's compromised or not playing, that's a series that is becomes a little more interesting and more winnable for the Houston Astros. But the key is the Astros. We can't look ahead to that. We got to focus on what it is right now. We have not clinched a playoff spot. I think the magic number is 4 to clinch a playoff spot, 4 more wins. And the division is still in reach, so that's also in play. But the Astros have to worry about the Astros right now. And this entire season, they have not been able to put together consistency as far as all phases of the game. The offense might be on one day, the pitching sucks. And that's been the pitching has let the Astros down quite a bit this year, more than we've seen in the past few years. Now, there's been several times where the offense has let them down, but guys like JP France was begging for run support and it never came. That's a problem, especially at home. They finished with a losing record at home. If we don't see Minute Maid Park the rest of this run, I'll be okay, because for some reason the Astros just do not perform there. So maybe not winning the division could be a good thing for this team. Play those 3 games on the road, then start a series on the road. It helped with Philadelphia last year. It helped the Padres last year as they got over on the Dodgers in 4. So however it needs to be done is how it needs to be done. But the division is still in play, and the 2 seed in the bye is still in play. But they squandered a golden opportunity to lock that down. So maybe it's destined for them to go the hard route. We'll see. But after that royal sweep, which, last year, the team that I thought was going to be good because of the way that they played us was the Baltimore Orioles. And I said, I thought coming into this year, I was like, this team's got to be a playoff team. From what I saw last year and how the Astros just could not figure them out, I thought the Orioles are going to be a good team this year. And they're going to finish more than likely with the best record in the American League. They're still Tampa Bay is still on their heels, still a chance that they can catch them, but looks like it's going to be the Baltimore Orioles. For the rest of the American League, as I mentioned, the Orioles are in the 1 seed. They still have not won the division. Tampa's still, I think, 2.5 games back. So there's still room. There's still things to be determined in the American League East with those 2. Currently, they're the 1 seed. Texas leads the American League West, and they are the 2 seed currently. 2.5 game lead over the Astros, and a 4 game lead right now, I think, over the Mariners. So Seattle has 4 more with Texas in Seattle, but they got to worry about these next 2 with Houston and they've already dropped the first game. So as for the Mariners, man, they got to win every game out from here on out. And it kind of played out the way that I said it would. About a month ago, when the AL West was heating up, I thought it would be a pretty tight race because each team owned the other team. The Seattle Mariners owned us this year. It just is what it is. They've won 8 of 11. They swept us at home. They owned us, and that was a team that I just didn't want to see if it came to playoff time. And it kind of is playoff time right now. And ironically, we're facing them. We got that first game, and the playoffs have pretty much started for the Mariners and Astros. So they're faring pretty well against them right now. But that was a team that's owned us the entire year. But what did I say? I didn't think the Mariners would win the division because they could not beat the Texas Rangers. They hadn't played in a while. You had to go back to early June and then mid-May before these two series that were going to take place at the end of the year. But those games, I said it a month ago, those games weren't even close. They don't. For some reason, the Texas Rangers this year owns the Seattle Mariners, and that proven to be true this past series. I was right. They own the Seattle Mariners, and they have no answer for Texas, and Texas is their complete kryptonite. The Rangers own them. The Rangers own the Mariners. Now, the Astros own the Rangers, and they know that. And if you look at the playoffs, let's say everything remains the same, and Texas is a 2 seed, Baltimore's 1, Texas 2, Twins are 3, Tampa's 4, Toronto's 5, Houston 6, okay? That means Minnesota will play Houston first round, and the winner goes on to play the Texas Rangers. That's a nightmare for the Rangers because the two teams that have owned them this year is, of course, the Houston Astros and the Minnesota Twins. If you look at the two series, Texas played against Minnesota. The Twins won 5 of the 7. I think it was 5 of the 7 games. They had no answer for the Twins. That would be a nightmare matchup if Texas remains at number 2, and they're going to have to face the winner of the two teams that have their number, either Minnesota or Houston. If you're a Ranger fan, not a good spot. I think the Rangers fare good against the Blue Jays. I think Texas would get rid of them pretty quickly, and I think they would fare well against Tampa Bay as well. But they're not on that side of the bracket. Now, the other side of the bracket looks like it's an American League East side of the bracket. Tampa Bay will be matched up with Toronto, and Toronto won 2 of 3 this past weekend, and they got 3 more with them this weekend coming up. 3 more games with Tampa Bay this weekend coming up. So if it plays out the same way, and say they get a split, they'll be matching up about a week later, or not even a week later. They'll be matching up later on that week in that wild card series. So they're going to be seeing a lot of each other, and that's going to be very interesting for the American League East. Now, the winner of that series goes on to face the Baltimore Orioles. So that whole side is American League East, and they'll settle out their division rivals their divisional rivalry in the playoffs. So that'll be interesting as well. But it doesn't fare well for the Rangers if they remain in that 2 seed, and it's either the Minnesota Twins or the Houston Astros waiting for them or waiting to get to them to the next round. The Rangers did not fare well against either one of those teams this year, so it would be, it wouldn't be in their favor, that's for sure. But we'll see what happens then. I think the Astros are in a good spot, which is hard to believe after, getting swept by the Royals, actually losing 5 of 6 to the Royals, losing 2 of 3 to the A's. After man, that was just such a deflating time frame. But hopefully that's the lowest of the low, and the Astros can overcome those horrendous losses to the 2 worst teams in the American League. Now, going back to what I was saying, I kind of got off track. I thought Baltimore would be good this year. I'm interested to see how good Kansas City is going into next year. They're riding the momentum because it wasn't just the Astros they were handling. Now they did feast off the Astros the most this past week, but they've won, I think, 8 out of the last 9 games, 9 out of the last 10 games. I will be interested to see if they get their pitching better, how this team looks next year. I think the Royals might surprise some people and turn it around in the Central Division. And early picks, I might go with the Royals and win the Central Division next year. The team was impressive. Not just because they own my team, but that team was pretty impressive ending this year. So maybe Kansas City Royal fans could you might have something to look forward to. I know it's been almost a decade since they were winning the World Series, going to back-to-back World Series, and before that it was 20-something years. But I think that team might be on the up and up. So that's something for you Royals fans. But as for the Houston Astros, we got to handle business. We got to handle business tonight. We got to go about our business the right way. And let me get a score update before I close out and go watch the game. 2-0 Seattle. So Seattle has taken a lead 2-0. Yeah, 2-0. Bottom of the third inning. So Seattle is strike first. We'll see what happens. But I appreciate you guys joining me for another episode of the H-Town Shutdown. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Have a good night, good evening, good day, whenever you're watching this.